Hello and Happy New Year. You're watching Eye on Politics on CBS News, Dallas-Fort Worth. 2023 begins with a bitter showdown over Speaker of the U.S. House, not between the two political parties, but Republicans. While more than 200 GOP members of Congress have voted repeatedly for Kevin McCarthy for Speaker, 20 have opposed him, keeping him from winning the 218 votes needed. We spoke with one of the Republican holdouts, Congressman-elect Keith Self of the 3rd Congressional District in Collin County Thursday morning, ahead of the 7th vote for Speaker of the House.
I have been very clear that I am looking for leadership. There is a trust issue here with the Republican conference. I have looked at the budget diagram in the last 23 years since I retired from the U.S. military. The national debt has gone from 10 trillion to 31 trillion. That is, and there are other issues, other great issues, but that is the existential threat to our republic that I see. And I want someone that is going to take these good rules that we have developed over the last few months and enforce them. Because as we know, 218 members of this House can change anything. So without strong leadership, I believe that we will continue the historical path of just adding to the national debt.
So are you saying Kevin McCarthy is the problem?
No, the problem is with the conference. I have a lack of trust in my Republican colleagues because of history. I look at this chart and the vertical line of the national debt is my issue. The Republicans have been in charge of the House of Representatives 16 of the last 23 years, and yet this line just continues to shoot up. So what I'm looking for in the leader, in the speaker, is leadership. And I have yet to hear that, and that's what I want to hear.
So who in your mind, so if you're saying Kevin McCarthy isn't the problem, who in your mind is the leader? Do you see a path for him at all? Could you see yourself, you said the first vote today, you're not going to support him, but do you see perhaps that you would if there are more concessions?
Well, the person, you've asked several questions there, Jack. The first question is who? We heard the man on the floor of the House yesterday, Jim Jordan. He's got the experience, he's got the charisma, he's got the vision.
But he doesn't want the job.
The problem is Jim Jordan doesn't want the job. So that leaves us in the conundrum that we're in. So until someone steps up and demonstrates that leadership, and that's all I'm asking for, is someone to say that I am going to be the strong leader of this conference. We're going to enforce these rules. I am where I am. Let's be honest. Nancy Pelosi ruled the Democratic caucus with an iron fist. There was no velvet over it. There was an iron fist. And so we need someone that will do that.
But in a sense, though, if that's the case, she was able to do that, as my understanding, and I'm not up in Congress and I don't cover it full time, but my understanding is that she didn't have some of the rules that you and other Republicans have fought for, making it easier to remove the speaker. In fact, didn't she have the rules change so that it would be more difficult to remove her?
Oh, yeah. They took most of the authority away from the individual members of Congress. And that's why I'm fighting for this so hard, because I'm not going to be in leadership. I'm not going to be a chairman. I'm just going to be a freshman congressman whenever we're sworn in. And so I need these rules. But again, rules are only as good as when they are enforced. If they're not enforced, these good rules mean nothing. And 218 members of the U.S. Congress can change any rule.
So how do you get somebody who you said can rule with an iron fist when you have rules that make it easier to remove that person?
It's a great question. I don't know. What you're seeing in action today is democracy. It's chaotic. It's messy. We're going to go to the floor of the House and see what happens. I don't have an answer to your question. I don't know the way ahead. Every day has been different. Every day has brought new challenges. Every day has brought more negotiations. So I don't know the answer to your question.
How involved have you been in the conversations since you arrived in Washington the last couple of weeks, and even since you were elected back in November?
We had a very good 2 days of rules discussions back in orientation. Since then, I've not been deeply involved in the discussions. In fact, just to share with you a story, when I cast my first vote on Tuesday for Jim Jordan, the House Freedom Caucus was shocked. I've not been talking to them. I wasn't coordinating with them. So several of them came over to introduce themselves to me because they didn't even know who I was. So I've not been involved in the negotiations, but listen, we all know what they are because the rules come out. We get lots of descriptions of them. We get lots of reports on the conversations that are taking place. So while I've not been involved in the room, for the most part, we keep up with the changes.
What is your end game?
I don't know. I will tell you, there's only one red line that I have. That is, we will not elect Hakeem Jeffries as the Speaker of the House. When that becomes apparent, that will be all hands on deck. And I do not believe that this Republican majority, as narrow as it is, will ever elect Hakeem Jeffries as the Democrat Speaker of the House.
Is there anything that Kevin McCarthy can say to the Republicans today that will change your mind and gain your support of him for Speaker?
I've already laid it out for you. I want a leader. I want a leader to step forward and say, I'm going to lead this conference. And I want to hear that. That's what I want to hear.
And so if that's Kevin McCarthy, you can see yourself voting for him?
I don't know. That has yet to be determined. As I say, this is a messy process. We are going to go to the House, to the floor of the House today, and I'm going to see what happens. We're going to go in there and see if there's been any movement overnight, if there's been any discussions of any magnitude or any consequence. I don't know.
So when I was speaking with Congressman Pat Fallon yesterday, he had said his thought was that the mechanism is in place where 5 Republicans want to remove the Speaker, then what else is there that you want? Because if the mechanism is there, then that vote can happen to basically a no confidence vote can happen. So why not give that a shot?
You're talking about the motion to vacate, and I think it is set at 5 today. And I think about that this way. That is a very high bar for any office to consider. Offices here, regardless of whether you're a moderate or conservative, are not going to sit around every day saying that was the straw that broke the camel's back. Today, we're going to go out and have the motion to vacate. That is a very high bar. I'm not sure that that's going to control the day-to-day issues, the day-to-day decisions that leak national debt. They're just not going to be, it's going to be a leakage as opposed to a tsunami. So I just don't give much credence. It's there, we need it. We need to be able to hold a speaker accountable, but that's a very high bar that will take a very, very conscious decision to enact.
So you said this is democracy at work, it's messy. How long though can this go on realistically?
I have no idea.
But at some point, doesn't this hurt Republicans?
This is for the soul of our nation. We have got to get this right, Jack. This is important. This may be the most important vote I cast for the next 2 years. Because if we don't have this, we can continue down this rat hole of vertical national debt increase. This is unsustainable. This may be the most important vote. We have got to get this right.
And let me ask you, because I've read that Congressman Scalise of Louisiana's name has been mentioned. He has said he doesn't want it. Is that someone that you could be comfortable with becoming Speaker?
I'm not sure. I would have the same requirements for anyone else that I've laid out for you already. I think Jim Jordan meets them. I don't know.
So let me ask you a question as far as today is concerned. You're going to get out there with all your other colleagues, and someone obviously is going to nominate Kevin McCarthy again, and then someone is going to nominate somebody else. Mm-hmm. And so do you know who the other person is who may be nominated by an alternative member of Congress today, and Republicans? And I'm wondering, when you hear that person's name, so you'll make a decision right then and there, but how, because we don't really have a lot of debate. We don't hear from these candidates who are nominated. So how are people supposed to hear? How is the American public supposed to hear once these candidates are nominated and then they don't speak? How can the American people see this process really going on instead of just having a backroom discussion?
It's a great question, Jack. I think you need to ask someone who is more informed of the rules. I'm not even sworn in yet. I don't hear it either. You know what I'm looking for, and that's what I will continue to look for, regardless of who is nominated.
And if this takes a week, 2 weeks, that's okay with you?
I don't think it will take that long. I'm not going to speculate on how long it will take. I have no idea. I know we're going to go to the floor of the House today at noontime, and we will have at least one vote. Beyond that, I have no idea.
And do you think this is really going to be a question for Kevin McCarthy to decide, okay, I see that I'm never going to get 218 votes, and so I just need to step aside? Is that what you're waiting for?
I can't speak for Kevin McCarthy. I have no idea if that's in his thinking or not.
Is that something you'd like to see, though, for him to just step aside?
I have laid out my requirements. I want to see somebody with leadership step forward. That's my only goal here. Is I want someone to lead this Republican conference to address the existential threats that our nation faces today.
My last question on this topic, and then I do want to ask you about some other news happening today, and that is, are there any other rules changes, anything else that you would like to see that you haven't seen just yet?
No, I do have problems with the cut-go issue. It's if there is an increase in the mandatory spending, there must be an equivalent decrease in mandatory spending. And that's going to take more chutzpah than I think this conference has. That is a real, that's a real vote that will take a lot of courage. And I'm not sure that goes anywhere because mandatory spending are the big social programs. So that is one of the things that I'm watching carefully to see if the cut-go will be operative.
And let me ask you about some other news happening today. We hear that President Biden is going to go to the border. We don't know exactly where. What's your thought about that?
Well, my thought about it is it's about time. How long has he been in office? 2 years? I've been to the border twice in my campaign. Once at night to see the cartel operation, once during the daytime to talk to the border agents and the sheriffs and the landowners. President Biden should be down there. Hey, this is a great example about what we're talking about, Jack. Leadership. He has shown no leadership on the border. It is the other existential threat that I think we've got to get control of. And this is a great example to our discussion today. Why have we not seen more leadership out of Joe Biden on the border? I'll let him answer the question.
Isn't it Congress's responsibility to deal with the border and come up with policy and change, laws, et cetera, or priorities regarding the border?
The Congress, let me remind you, the Congress allocates resources. The executive branch executes the laws. We have laws that the executive branch, i.e. President Biden, could be enforcing today, and he does not. The Congress executes nothing. We allocate resources. That is Congress's job. To deal with it, to use your phrase, if you're talking about executing the law of the land, that's the job of the executive branch. So
But
a
doesn't
little
the
lesson
law
in
need to
civics
be,
there.
doesn't the law need to be updated?
We've got lots of laws that could be enforced today that are not even being tried to be approached, to enforce. I was on the border talking to the border agents. They are hamstrung. Agents told me that they normally don't even chase people, because if a man falls down while he's being chased and breaks his nose, the agent is held responsible. If he wrecks his car while he's running from a border agent, in some cases, the border agent would be held responsible. That is not right. President Biden has no desire whatsoever to enforce any of the laws on the books with the border.
And let me ask you about your priorities. Once you're able to be sworn in, which of course means that speaker has to be chosen, what are your priorities this session?
Well, we've got a lot, because there's a lot to deal with. This nation has got more issues than we'll be able to tackle. The debt, I will go back to the debt. We must find ways to take care of the debt. We must reverse the trajectory of the national debt. We've got to secure the southern border. The southern border is not just the families that are coming across, it's the unmarried military-age men that are coming across, it's the sex trafficking that's coming across, effectively slave labor in the United States under the sex trafficking that's being done, and the fentanyl. The fentanyl that's coming across the border kills a plane load of people every day in the United States. Beyond that, we really do have to address China. We need to rebuild our military into a 21st century force that can fight all of the areas of warfare, to include space. So those are the big priorities I have, although there are many more. Then we could get into the moral issues of abortion. The abortion up to and including the day of birth is a stain on our nation. So we've got plenty of issues to address, Jack.
Republican Congressman-elect Keith Selth of the 3rd Congressional District in Collin County, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate your insight today.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
This is the first time since 1923, 100 years, that a Speaker of the House hasn't won the job on the first ballot. Republican Congressman Pat Fallon of the 4th District, also in North Texas, has made it clear he's not pleased with the 20 GOP holdouts.
We are witnessing history, not the kind that I want to witness, but we are certainly there nonetheless. And this hasn't happened, as you said, in 100 years. And I'm a bit confused as to why it's happening, to be quite honest. There's 222 Republicans. We know that with only a 9-seat majority that we need to stay united, or we're not going to get anything accomplished. And there's a process to choose the speaker. The Democrats have a very similar process as Republicans do, which is we vote in the conference, which is the caucus of the 222 Republicans, and we choose a nominee. Because if you don't do it that way, you're going to have chaos when you get to the House floor. And we did that. And I always pledged to vote for the winner of the nomination process within our own caucus. I do that because I don't want to be like the Republicans in Pennsylvania yesterday that have a majority and ended up electing a Democratic speaker. I don't want to do that like we did in 2009, right before I got into the Texas legislature, and have 11 Republicans jump ship with 65 Democrats to make a majority. So Kevin McCarthy won that process, 188 votes to 31. And yet here we are, people that aren't happy with that decision and that process are now upsetting the apple cart.
So 3 members from Texas, including Keith Selth from our area in North Texas, voted against McCarthy. Have you spoken with him and Chip Roy? And I think it's Congressman McLeod. What do they want?
Yeah, Mike Cloud. That's a great question, because I think different people want different things. And I'm not sure, and I don't want to speak for them. But what I can tell you is this. For the conservatives that are watching out there, please understand that we have to take yes for an answer sometimes. And there is some folks out there that think Kevin McCarthy is going to do a good or even great job. There are others that are reticent. They're not sure. Okay, so if you don't think he's going to do a good job, we have a mechanism in place in the rules package, which will follow the speaker's vote, to remove him or any other speaker if they're not doing the job that we selected them to do, which means this is what's called a call on the chair. Before this, you had to take a majority of the Republican, or I'm sorry, the majority of the ruling party to have a call on the chair. It's a no confidence vote, Jack. We reduced that number down to 5 members of the Republican conference can call for a call on the chair. And you can rest assured all the Democrats are going to vote to remove any Republican speaker for the sheer chaos and power in the empowerment that it engenders to them. So that's 218, which is a majority. So if tomorrow or a week from now or a month from now, folks feel like Kevin McCarthy's not following through on his promises, we can simply remove him from office. So if you have that mechanism in place, what else are you fighting for?
And today, former President Trump urged the 20 holdouts to back McCarthy. Do you think this will help?
I don't think it will hurt. I know that, they're strong-willed, and conservatives are independent thinkers, and it's harder for us to unite folks that are politically right of center than they are politically left of center. They tend to march in lockstep with the oligarchy on that side of the aisle. So I think it will help. So let's run down a bit of a list, Jack, if you will. Half of the Freedom Caucus is supporting Kevin McCarthy for Speaker. Jim Jordan, who is getting votes for Speaker, is not voting for himself. He's urging people to not vote for him, but to vote for Kevin McCarthy for Speaker. Donald Trump, Newt Gingrich. You have folks like Marjorie Taylor Greene. I don't think even Marjorie's fiercest critics don't call her a Republican in name only. She's one of the fiercest conservatives in the chamber. She's voting for Kevin McCarthy because, Jack, politics is the art of the possible. We have a 222-member conference, very diverse ideologically. There are some folks, it's hard to put an exact number, on kind of the other side of the ideological Republican spectrum that are saying that they will not vote for anyone but Kevin McCarthy, 20 or 30 of them. So you reach impasse. You can't give everybody what they want. So what do we call that dirty word in DC? Sometimes you compromise.
So does this boost Democrats?
I don't think there's a shadow of a doubt it boosts the Democrats. Of course it does. They are mocking us. The 212 of them are voting in lockstep. They are laughing. The mainstream media, I believe, will also say, look at these dysfunctional Republicans. They cannot rule. They cannot govern. And we have a rules package that is unprecedented in its decentralization of power. And not to get into the weeds, because there's a lot of inside baseball, but we negotiated a 72-hour rule. So any large major bill has to have 72 hours for us to actually digest it and read it and not rush to a vote. That's a good change. We have germaneness, where we have a one subject rule, which is, a major bill has to have one major subject. It can't have multiple, what we call a Christmas tree legislative order. And again, it can't be de-emphasized that rule of having 5 members being able to be empowered to have a call on the chair is really something that, again, sometimes you have to take yes for an answer.
Is that the first time that rule's been in place?
To my knowledge, to the 5-person rule. I think historically it was a bit different, but nobody would ever dare have a call on the chair, years ago. And politics, as evolves and it changes quite a bit. But I'm very happy with the rules package that we have. And I think we need to understand that 10, 5, or 20 can't dictate to the entire conference. So we have to listen to each other, be respectful. I don't like the infighting at all. I want it to end. And I want to fight socialism. And the way to do that is to get sworn in and then pass great legislation that puts the Democrats on the defensive. Hopefully they'll join us in passing some of this in the Senate. I doubt it. But then there'll be repercussions, and the American people will decide who they want to govern come 2024.
And my last question to you actually is, as far as committee chair assignments, 3 North Texas members of Congress may very well, under a McCarthy speakership, become committee chairs. Does this put their chairmanships in jeopardy?
That's a great question. The way we select, and this is another reason why I like the rules package, the way we actually select committee chairs on the Republican conference, and we even select committees for all of our members, is through what's called a steering committee. And on the steering committee, Kevin McCarthy has 4 votes. Steve Scalise will have, I believe, 2 or 3 votes as the majority leader. The whip gets a vote. And then we have regional representatives from around the country. We have decentralized the power even more, because that's one of the other things we wanted to see. So we created even more regional representatives. So it's about 33 to 35 votes now. And McCarthy only gets 4 of those. So that's another good thing to put this power in the hands of the membership. So I hope that that doesn't, jeopardize North Texas's influence. And the quicker that we solve this issue, the better. It's honestly, it's okay. We had one day. We had, even if it's 2 days, but I don't want this, and I don't think it can drag on to 2 weeks, or God forbid, like in the 19th century, a couple of months, because then that really starts to endanger the country at large.
Congressman Pat Fallon of the 4th Congressional District here in North Texas, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Jack. God bless.
Democratic members of Congress, including Mark Vesey of the 33rd District here in North Texas, shares his frustration about what's happening on Capitol Hill.
I think it's like sheer craziness, and all of us are trying to figure out when this GOP train wreck is going to come to a halt, and we're going to get down to business. Right now, it looks like it's the hot mess express, and that there's no end in sight. And us being able to organize this Congress. We have a lot of things that need to get done, but the one thing that's clear to me that I just want to remind everybody out there that's watching is that with the narrow majority that the Republicans have, nothing is going to get done without whoever the speaker is being able to reach out to Democrats and get things done. It's just not going to happen. You're never going to get any sort of cooperation with these 20 holdouts that they have here and be able to put together 218 votes to pass anything without Democrats. And so viewers in North Texas need to understand that. I don't care if you live in Ruby Red, Aledo, or if you live in the bluest parts of Fort Worth or Dallas. It's not going to happen without Democratic cooperation. We see these guys just don't have their act together.
And I was, reading some articles, and, some suggest that Democrats are secretly enjoying this. Does this give you a boost politically?
No, I'm not enjoying this at all. I mean, we have a lot of work that we have to get done. We're going to have to raise the debt ceiling. We're going to have to pass a defense authorization bill later this year. We're going to have to be able to do things like keep the government open. So no, I'm not enjoying this at all. Some of the Republicans in their conference are telling Kevin McCarthy that they will only vote for him if he promises to only pass pieces of legislation that have that can only be passed with Republican votes. And they can't do that. Like they can't do that. That's something that no speaker, whether it's McCarthy or anyone else, can deliver. They have to get Democratic votes to be able to get 218 to pass anything on the House floor. And so, I'm really concerned that the longer and longer this drags out, that these guys are going to just entrench themselves, and no one's going to blink. And we're going to be on the verge of perhaps a financial, meltdown if we can't do things like raise the debt ceiling and be able to do the basics in order to just keep the government running. I'm very concerned about this.
Let me ask you, when Democrats had a very narrow majority in the last Congress as well, and the Democrats were able to pass legislation without any Republican votes, why is it different this time, do you think?
I think a couple of reasons, but I think the biggest reason is that Republicans just really don't know how to govern. It's not what they do. They know how to oppose. They know how to sort of hector people about what's this type of spending means, and sort of, again, lecture people on the virtues of the founding fathers and sit on all these platitudes, but they really don't know how to govern at all. And I think that that's coming into clear focus here. That they know how to oppose, and they know how to make these speeches on revisionist history on what the Constitution means. But when it comes to actually getting things done, they just don't really have the ability to do that.
And my last question to you, Congressman, and I appreciate your time, and that is talking about bipartisanship. Members of the congressional delegation here in North Texas, are you in this new Congress still finding it possible? I mean, a lot of these, most of the people have been serving in Congress for a long time. Your ability to work together and across the aisle, how is that? What is the state of that relationship?
I think that when it comes to getting some things done for North Texas, that we will be able to work together. I have a great working relationship with several of the Republican members that are part of the North Texas delegation, including Kay Granger, who's poised to be the chair of appropriations, once this Congress is organized. And so I certainly think that we can get some things done for North Texas. I think the biggest hurdle is going to be whether or not we're able, again, to just be able to pass some basic bills dealing with being able to keep the government open. I think that those are the sort of challenges that we're going to have out of this Congress, is when it comes to the things that are going to be on national news, the things that are sort of headline capturing, whether or not the Republicans have the ability to deliver. I don't think that they do. I think that is pretty clear by what we saw yesterday and what we're seeing today, that they just don't really have the wherewithal and the gumption to be able to deliver on those things. And that's what really worries me. But when it comes to some smaller bills, some things that we can pass through certain legislative processes, then I think that those things that, yeah, we as Democrats and Republicans, particularly locally, we can work together.
Democratic Congressman Mark Vesey of the 33rd Congressional District in North Texas, thank you so much. We appreciate your time and your insight.
Good to see you, Jack.
Without a speaker, members of the House can't be sworn in. Last week, we spoke with Democratic Congresswoman-elect Jasmine Crockett about her priorities.
I think I'm finally starting to get excited. That has been the question for some time. And my response, for the most part, has been, it's hard to get excited knowing where we are in this country. But I feel empowered, and I'm empowered by the people of District 30 to go and be their fighter, to be their warrior, to be their voice and their representative. And honestly, there really is no greater honor that I can think of, to have almost 1 million Texans come together and say, you're going to be the one. And when I say almost 1 million Texans come together, whether you voted or not, you made a statement. And so our districts are approximately 766,000 people. I look forward to meeting so many new constituents and working for them. I know that they're going to be excited to blow my phone up. January is tax time. And so that's usually when we get a lot of phone calls. So I'm excited to help out. I'm excited to hopefully get this country back on track and get us to a place in which people say, you know what, it's not so scary, say, to send my daughter to school in Texas because of some of the laws that they've instituted as it relates to Roe v. Wade and things like that. I'm excited because I truly believe that the people in this country, not just the state of Texas, are really looking for better tomorrows. And I'm going to do everything that I can to deliver upon that.
And what exactly does that mean? So what are your priorities?
Yeah, so, I'm going back into a minority. I spent my entire freshman term in what I would consider to be an extreme minority in the Texas House. And I say extreme because our numbers definitely are not as close as they're going to be in the U.S. House. And obviously, the Texas Senate also belongs to the Republicans along with the governor's mansion. It's not as bad on the federal level that I'm walking into now. But I want to be realistic. A lot of times, one of the things that turns voters off sometimes is this idea that they say, well, they sell us the world, right? So I don't want to sell people the world. I want to be real about the fact that I'm walking into a minority, but I think that there are opportunities in which we can work together and collaboratively. I think one of those spaces is around what we're going to do as far as consumers, as well as employees in the airline industry. Most people didn't realize that we could have a meltdown like the one that we've seen here recently with our most recent storm. And I do want to comment and say that I am a climate change warrior as well, as we talk about these crazy storms that we're enduring in this country. And I do applaud what's happened thus far as the investments that have been made in legislation, in the form of legislation in the last Congress, in the current Congress. So I am excited, number one, that we've made those investments, but I know that we're going to have to continue to push forward with more investments so that we can minimize the impact of some of these crazy storms. But going back to our most recent situation that we had as it relates to the airline industry, the FAA reauthorization bill is up, which means that there's an opportunity to look over kind of what are these FAA regulations and anything that seemingly could be germane, which means that honestly, anything that has to do with aviation, we'll most likely be able to touch it in this big, what we call omnibus bill. And so I'm excited for the opportunity to basically make consumers, as well as those that work in the airline industry, feel more comfortable based upon the bills that we're able to put together, or the way that we're able to work through that one really big bill in a very bipartisan way. Another issue is the economy. Most people don't know, but I am a business major in undergrad. So the two things that make up me are business as well as law. And so I'm excited for an opportunity to work on economic issues. We know that people are still struggling. We know that there's a lot of talk about whether or not we're going into a recession and what that looks like. And so I think that this is a space, we may not agree wholeheartedly, but I absolutely believe that we will be able to at least look at some of the equity issues around financial opportunities. One of my big issues is housing. So we know that there's a housing crisis in the entire country. And so being able to work in a collaborative way, even if it's with those on the local level, to be able to come up with options. One of the amazing projects that I was able to attend the groundbreaking for was a collaborative project with Builders of Hope. And Builders of Hope has decided we're going to make home ownership affordable no matter what, right? So regardless of the fact that we've got increasing costs of materials, increasing costs of labor, they still wanted to make affordable a reality. And so they worked collaboratively with the state level, as well as the county level and the city level to get some funding, as well as private funding. And so it's this private-public partnership in which people are walking into homes with $50,000 worth of equity on day one. That is completely unheard of. And they're given an opportunity to be lifted out of poverty. That is a big goal of mine, and to make sure that this widening of the gap that we're continually seeing between the haves and the have-nots is minimized. And so economic opportunities, I think, is something that I will be able to forge a bridge with a lot of my colleagues across the aisle. Bringing it back home to the things that really got me into the U.S. House, I obviously want to work on voting rights. That is exactly why most people really became very familiar with my face and my fight. It was over voting rights. And I still I know it, right? When people look at Georgia and they say, well, how can Georgia do it and Texas can't? Well, a couple of things. Georgia definitely went after and added a number of voter suppression bills after they saw record turnout that produced 2 Democratic senators 2 years ago. But we also still know that they've got some of the basics. They've got online voter registration. We saw in this country that there was a massive increase in voter participation amongst Gen Zers, but we did not see that in the state of Texas. And it's because we still make it hard just to even access the ballot box. And so something like online voter registration, it is going across almost 30 states in this country, both Democratic and Republican states. And I think that if you believe in democracy, you believe that people should at least be able to easily access the ballot box if they are lawfully allowed to do that. And so I want to make sure that maybe I can work on some small pieces of the larger picture of the Voting Rights Act that unfortunately we did not get reauthorized because we just did not have enough votes in the Senate. So I'll still be paying attention to that, because that makes a big difference for Texans. When you look at our voter participation, it is so much lower than so many other states. And I think it's because we simply don't have some of the very simple, easy things to make voting a little less cumbersome for people. And obviously, I'm a woman and I'm from Texas. We know that Roe v. Wade is a Texas case. It came out of Dallas County. We know Henry Wade was the district attorney, and, Crowley sits right there within my congressional district. We also know that Sarah Weddington was one of the lead attorneys in that case. She swore into the Texas House with Eddie Bernice Johnson 50 years ago. And so it's Texas women that saved this country before. And I believe that it's going to take a few Texas women to rise up and save us again as it relates to reproductive rights. And so I will continue to fight for reproductive justice and access. And so what does that look like when we're in the minority? Well, that may look like me making sure that a state like Texas doesn't try to limit interstate commerce, meaning not trying to limit a woman's ability to go to a state where they can lawfully get an abortion, something that they can't access here in the state of Texas. Do I think that we'll get the votes to actually overturn Roe v. Wade right now? Absolutely not. But I do believe that we can engage in a real and honest conversation and maybe at least prevent some of the aggressive states that have the position and posture of a Texas or Florida from trying to basically tie people down in the state of Texas and not allowing them their freedom to make their choices and go where they need to go to get their protection. So I'll stop there. I got a lot.
Well, we look forward to speaking with you during your term in Congress about these issues and other issues that come up. Jasmine Crockett, Democratic representative for the 30th Congressional District in Texas. Thank you so much for joining us. Happy New Year to you.
Thanks, Jack.
For the first time in 16 years, Tarrant County has a new Commissioner's Court judge, Republican Tim O'Hare. He succeeds Republican Glenn Whitley, who retired at the end of last month. O'Hare discussed his priorities this year.
Two things right off the bat. Number one, we must cut property taxes. Property taxes throughout the state are too high, and we need to set an example in Tarrant County. We're the third largest county in the state, and we need to set an example for all governmental agencies, entities to follow, which is really working to cut the property tax rate, not just saying you're cutting taxes, cutting it by a penny, and then people actually end up paying more on their tax bill, but actual tax relief. And then we want to be the safest large county in America. We're the 15th largest county in the country, third largest in Texas, as I mentioned, and we want to be the safest large county around, so we're going to have a strong emphasis on law and order, law enforcement, protecting our men and women in blue, and making sure the streets are safe for every man, woman, and child in this county.
So let's talk about property taxes because, as you mentioned, that's a priority for yours in the county. Now you have the state legislature meeting as well on top of that. So how concerned are you that, whatever the state does won't impact the county as you're trying to lower the rate as well? Because you still have to have enough money to function, right?
Sure. Yeah. Well, anytime the legislature goes into session, you get a little nervous, and because it's a mad rush to pass as many bills as possible, and we have a lot of legislators that want to come back and tell their constituents, "I passed this bill, I passed that bill." We want good legislation passed. There's going to be a lot of proposals on the table for property tax relief. One of the things that I would like to see is I would like to see a cap on appraisals. And I would make the cap 2.5%. With the way property values are just going through the roof in Texas, especially here in Tarrant County, it's almost an automatic 10% increase every year for everybody. So even significant tax rate cuts, you still end up paying more annually. So that's one of the ways they could address it. Of course, we all know that they're talking about taking the surplus and using that to buy down the tax rate. A lot of times that focuses on the school districts. And anything that helps cut property taxes for residents and businesses, I'm for, but we don't want them to just do it for schools. We want them to do it with the county also. But unfunded mandates, they do put them out there. So for example, right now we have, I think, 100 prisoners, give or take a few, that the state is supposed to take, that they're not taking yet. So we have to pay to house them, to keep them safe. And that's money out of our budget that the state should be responsible for. So yeah, there's regularly unfunded mandates pushed down, but I think how you would deal with that and address that is you have a good relationship with the governor's office, you have a good relationship with the lieutenant governor's office, and with your state legislators. And I think a change you'll see from my office compared to my predecessor is I'll have a very, very, very good working relationship with our Tarrant County delegation and with the governor's office and with the lieutenant governor's office.
As far as the county property tax reduction, because you said it's one thing to just say, hey, we lowered the rate, but because of the appraisals, people are still paying more.
Right.
Well, if you set aside the state, how does the county accomplish that on its own, or can it?
It certainly can, and it is watching every dime like a hawk. It's eliminating wasteful spending, abusive spending. So my office, for example, I campaigned on this for, gosh, it seems like for 50 years, but I guess it was about a year and a half, that this office had too many people in it. I think there were 7 full-time employees in this office. So they passed a budget in October, and I think in large part due to me calling it out, but they passed a budget in October with 5 full-time employees in this office, and we're only going to have 4. So I'm not even going to fill one of those positions, because I think it has to start at the top, and you have to set the example. You can't say you've got to cut, you've got to cut, you've got to cut, but then you grow your budget. We're going to cut the county judge budget by not hiring someone to fill that extra spot. And that's what you do. What government does so often is somebody leaves, it's just a mad dash to go fill the position. Nobody stops and asks, do we really need this? Or can we combine duties with another position? And we'll be doing a lot of that to try to provide real tax relief, not just, hey, look, I cut your tax rate so I can claim I cut your taxes, actual tax relief, as opposed to the fake version that happens so often.
You also mentioned law enforcement being a top priority as far as crime reduction, et cetera. How do you do that? How do you accomplish that without pushing the budget, increasing the budget massively that would lead to an increase in property taxes, et cetera? Can you do that? Sure.
So you have to focus on it. You have to make it a priority. It's not just another department over there. We want to protect our law enforcement officers. A lot of people don't know the sheriff's department runs the jail, but also provides law enforcement for a couple of cities, since they don't have police departments, and for the unincorporated areas. So it's up to about 80,000 people where the sheriff's department is the police department for 80,000 people, but it's spread out across the whole county. And you make it a priority. Priority, of course, a lot of times means funding. And you shift the focus, I think, from more social-oriented to more law enforcement-oriented. And also, we have to move cases through the criminal court system faster. That's something that'll be a priority for the new district attorney, Phil Sorrells, and I'll work closely with Phil on that. It also has to be a priority of the judges in the criminal courthouse. But we also have to have a cooperation from the defense bar. So it's taken too long to get these cases to trial. The whole COVID issue and the close downs, that created serious problems with moving cases along. Now, it's not just for the victims, but it's also for the accused. We've got to move them faster. And there's a lot of ARPA money left. I'm waiting on an exact total, but it's multiple tens of millions of dollars, and we can use some of that money to aid our law enforcement. We had, it's probably been 3-4 months ago now, there was a fentanyl bust, and in just like a 6-week period, we had more fentanyl confiscated in Tarrant County than the entire state of Arizona had the whole year. So the border problem is very real and affects us up here in Tarrant County with drugs coming across the border, I think at record levels. So we'll do our part to address border security by making sure we're strong on 287G. We'll continue doing that if I have anything to do with it. It takes 3 votes in county government to get much of anything done. But hopefully, I think we'll have those 3 votes, especially if one of our commissioners, new commissioners, come on. Manny Ramirez is a Fort Worth police officer, and so I think he'll be a great addition to the court. But you make it a focus. And we do not want a reputation in Tarrant County of being lenient on crime. We want a reputation in Tarrant County that we're tough on crime. We want everybody to feel safe in their homes, in their businesses, and on the streets, regardless of what city they live in, what their neighborhood is like.
And with regards to, you mentioned speeding up the backlog at the DA's office, is that going to take some money?
Sure.
Has Judge Sorrells talked to you about this already?
Well, we've been talking for months, not being presumptuous that we would win, but we hoped we would, and we knew what the numbers looked like, so it looked good. But we've been talking about these things for months. He's bringing in a lot of experienced prosecutors from really across the state, and one of the things that Tarrant County was lacking was experienced prosecutors. A lot of people had left the DA's office for whatever reason. He's working to bring people back, and he's, I think, going to announce today a new chief that will be very good for the DA's office, and both DA Sorrells and Sheriff Weber and I will work very closely together and our goal is to make this the safest large county in the country, and I think we owe it to our citizens, and that's really the #1 priority of government, or it's supposed to be.
And my last question to you is, how was the transition with you and Judge Whitley?
He was incredibly helpful, made it very easy. It's very smooth. We've always gotten along, I think, politically. Most people would tell you I'm more conservative than he is, but he was very helpful. We had multiple conversations right here in this office, and I give him tremendous credit and appreciate his service over almost, I think, 25 years in Tarrant County.
Judge Tim O'Hare, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
We appreciate it.
Yep, anytime.
Longtime Democratic Dallas County Judge Clay Jenkins spoke with us about what he hopes the county can accomplish this year.
Well, I think it's going to be a great year. This is a very pragmatic and moderate court, and I think they're going to focus on the issues that are important to the people of Dallas County and North Texas.
What are your priorities? You know, we've heard a lot about property taxes being too high. Where are you on that?
Well, of course, as you know, I always try to keep property taxes low. I've sought to cut the property tax rate every year I've been elected. I think that one of the best ways that we can keep our economy strong and our property taxes low is to focus on keeping families safe and healthy. There's three major things that I think we can do across jurisdictions, including cities and school districts and hospital organizations, healthcare organizations. We've got to look, number one, at early childhood, whether that's expanding the programs that the county is currently expanding, getting others help to do it, like our visiting nurses with newborn moms of at-risk births at Parkland. But it's also good quality childcare, getting that good quality childcare seat for those youngest kids, getting more kids in pre-K at 3 and 4. That not only puts the kid on a great path to success, it allows the parents, the young parents, to re-enter the workforce, and we need them in that workforce. And then when we look at our young people in particular, but also everyone, we're seeing a real crisis in mental health care right now. You know, 90% of Americans on a CNN poll said that mental health care is a crisis. And so looking for ways to expand that mental health care access to make sure that when people go into their primary care physician, they're asked those mental health questions. And for the county to focus on mental health the way we focused on COVID and HIV and other infectious diseases, to make sure people get the help that they need. And then, you know, third, I think we've got to do more in criminal justice for criminal justice reform. Right now for the county, I think the main thing the county can do is the county runs that jail, and we're about 1,000 to 1,500 people higher in jail population than we were pre-COVID. That limits the ability to hold the most dangerous suspects in jail for as long as we'd like to hold them, and it leads us to having more people in jail that really don't need to be there. They could be back out with their families and at their jobs. And so we got to work with everyone, including the state, who needs to pick their prisoners up to get that to happen. And we're going to do that. Those are three big things that are really my focus in visiting with other jurisdictions of how we're going to improve on those things, because those are three drivers of success for us, not just this year, but over the next 4 years and beyond. Now, we'll still keep doing the good things that we do in affordable housing and trails and roads and all that. But those three drivers, and talking to my school superintendents and others, and mental health folks and CEOs of hospitals, those three drivers can really drive this economy and drive a better standard of life and better quality of life.
And the county's role in that, I mean, because school districts play a role in some of that as well, perhaps cities, or is this really a county focus?
Well, it's all of us. So for instance, the county just put $4 million into expanding the visiting nurse program for our youngest moms to get the health and the training they need to be successful with at-risk young people. With the pre-K, it's both the county and the city and of course the school districts, because at the Workforce Solutions Board of Greater Dallas, where I'm the chief elected officer, we have about $200 million a year budget, and most of that goes towards childcare. So can we fashion a way for our childcare agencies to do some of that pre-K work for our 3-year-olds so that those kids can stay at the childcare place after they finish their pre-K courses. So that makes it more appealing to mom to drop them there and allows mom to get back in the workforce. Can we do more to get our more kids into quality pre-K at the 4-year level? That's going to put more people back in the workforce and help those kids. You know, kids who do well with childcare and pre-K at 3 and 4 are much more likely to be reading at grade level at the 3rd grade. And if you're reading at grade level at the 3rd grade, you're much more likely to graduate from high school and go on to get a good living wage job.
I wanted to ask you about the state legislature, which, as you know, is going to be coming into session next week. And what is your message to lawmakers, many of whom are very focused on reducing property taxes?
So we need to work together to reduce property taxes. Property taxes are way too high. And the state needs to do its part. You know, the state, it's kind of been a shell game of unfunded mandates to the counties and the cities, which they then have to pay for, and there's no money to pay for it. So we got to do our part to keep property taxes low, which means using some of that huge surplus at the state for property tax relief. But we don't want to sleep on the major issues that are affecting our present and our future, our workforce and our quality of life. Look, there's been a sea change, Jack, in what parents worry about from the time you and I were kids. And they were worried about us going out to a kegger or smoking cigarettes or having unprotected sex. All right. Now the major concerns that parents have on surveys are, my child's anxious, my child's depressed, I'm worried that my child may hurt themselves. That all falls into this mental health situation. And we do have a real problem with substance abuse, particularly opioids here, but we've got to address those things too. It can't be all, I love low property taxes, but it can't be all low property taxes. It's got to be getting our kids ready to succeed in life, keeping our families safe, and that includes mental health. And so we've really, really got to focus on that. COVID exposed a lot of those inequities, those disparities. It worsens some of those issues that people have with mental health and in some cases with substance abuse. And so we got to focus on that like we did across the state, the city, the county, and everyone on COVID. We fought to beat COVID. And sometimes we had to fight with each other to do it, but we fought to beat COVID. Now we got to fight to put mental health at the front and early childhood at the front of what we're doing so that we can build a sort of system that can allow our children and everyone to succeed.
Judge Clay Jenkins, thank you so much. We really appreciate your time and your insight.
Hey, appreciate you, Jack. Take care.
Dallas-based Southwest Airlines is still trying to smooth things over with its customers and employees more than 1 week after what many in the industry have described as an operational meltdown. It left thousands of passengers, pilots, and flight attendants stranded after canceling about 60% of their flight schedule for days. We spoke with Democratic Congressman Colin Allred of the 32nd Congressional District in North Texas and Republican Congressman Jake Ellzey of the 6th Congressional District in North Texas in a joint interview about Southwest's serious problems. They told us U.S. Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg should hold the airline accountable so that it fulfills promises to its customers. And we had more to ask. I'm wondering, aside from the executive branch, do you both believe that Congress needs to step in with additional legislation? Congressman Ellzey, we'll start with you.
No, absolutely not. This is a failure of one airline. We know what the problems were. They have to show that they fixed it. And very often, whenever you legislate something from the federal government, a one size fits all, Southwest isn't like the other airlines. Their network has worked differently, but successfully for 50 years. And passengers were inconvenienced. This is up to the market. They've got a lot of making up to do with the customers that make this company profitable. And they've got to show the entire country, because the spotlight is on them, that they're willing to make the changes necessary. And they have to drastically change course in many different ways. I know these people at Southwest. I've worked with them, and I have every reason to believe that they will do this on their own. I really don't want people who don't have any knowledge of how airlines work. At the federal government instituting changes, there was a law that passed several years ago that was meant to help make sure that pilots were rested. And instead, what it did is it exacerbated a fatigue problem based on well-intentioned one-size-fits-all crew day law. So let's let this fine airline fix itself, but we will hold their feet to the fire to ensure that they do. Or otherwise they'll have more folks coming after them. And I don't think anybody wants that. And we want to protect this airline. We're the biggest fans of Southwest Airlines. Colin and I both are. And I want to also say that, you know, this wasn't a Republican or Democrat thing. This affected millions of people nationwide, millions of families. And I feel after talking to Southwest, they know what's on their plate and they know they have to fix it.
And Congressman Allred, same question to you.
I agree with Jake. There's no role for us in terms of legislation to make Southwest run a better business. And, you know, I think it's been an incredibly well-run business for most of its lifetime. And the story of Southwest is one of, you know, really breaking into an industry and really changing it. And that innovation is important. But Jake's right. The market is going to be their real punishment here in many ways, which is that they've had an incredible loss of reputation. The reputational damage that they've done is going to take years to recover from. And that's why I want to see them do so much to dramatically show they've made changes. Where we can come in, I think, is on the consumer protection side. And there may be, you know, some efforts around that to make sure that folks are made whole here. But also, you know, there was a lack of communication, you know, with folks who expected to have their flights. It really wasn't the level of communication you'd expect. And then that is I think a consumer protection issue. So there may be some things that can be done around there, but we're not going to be able to legislate into making Southwest make the investments they need to make in their own infrastructure. That's not something we can do.
That's all for our busy week on Eye on Politics. I'm Jack Fink. Thank you for joining us. You're watching CBS News, Dallas-Fort Worth.